started. And the beginning is just some introductions and some ground rules. So if more people come in, hopefully they don't miss the important stuff. But I just want to start by saying thank you all so much for being here tonight for Zoom University 101, organizing virtual events as a student leader. And a huge thank you to our amazing panelists for being here. My name is Joyce Huang. I'm a current junior at Duke University, and I'm a designer at Glimpse, our sponsor for this event. Glimpse is an app that intentionally connects people through one-on-one chats, complete with icebreaker questions and games.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm head of growth at Glimpse. Super excited about this panel. We have some great people, and this is really an important topic about connecting people virtually and organizing virtual events. And we'd love to kick off the panel just with intros from our panelists, with like name, the organization you're part of, and a little bit about your experience in the virtual event space. We can start with Julia and then go to Derek, Venice, and then Frank.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me tonight, Glimpse team. I know we spoke a bunch of months ago, so I'm glad that this came together. I am the founder and CEO of Home from College, and WAYV, Home from College, is basically a one-stop shop platform to support college students as a supplement to their career to help them test drive their future with community offerings and live events and micro internships, really all wrapped up in a consumer-facing brand. And talking about live events, we fully built this whole business in COVID. Started in March off of a pivot from a very different business we were building, and has been really an awesome experience building something virtually during COVID, including events. So I'm happy to be here, and thanks for including me.
Hey everyone, yeah, so my name's Derek. I'm pretty involved on my campus as well as in a couple of different organizations. My biggest ones would probably be currently serving as the Penn Class of 2023 president, and I'm also serving as the Pennsylvania District of Circle K International Governor. So pretty much, primarily most of what I do in terms of my work is really to try to kind of, build a community and really foster social interaction, especially in this new virtual format. There's really been trying to find ways to really bring people together, and definitely not in an awkward way. I know kind of being online can make things difficult or can make things not as fun or exciting. And it's just really trying to, find platforms such as Glimpse and thinking outside the box and seeing how we can really push the boundaries and really explore different emerging options in this virtual setting. So that's pretty much what I've been doing, and I'm really glad to be here as well.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Venice. I am a third-year student at the University of Toronto. I'm doing stats and computer science, and I run the Women in Science and Computing team. So it's a team that I founded on campus last year, and we've been growing pretty quickly. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Joyce and Sarah, for having me. And we've been making a bunch of pivots to adapt to the virtual world. So I'm excited to share some of those strategies with everyone here today.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Frank Thomas. I'm a current senior at Duke University and currently studying economics and public policy. On campus, I'm the president of Duke University Union, which is our event programming and media creation board on campus. So we have 18 subcommittees that help fill a bunch of roles on campus for students to engage with free events, as well as to create media and really celebrate the arts and culture on campus.
Great, thank you all for introducing yourselves. For our first question, many of the people who registered, they asked us about creative virtual event ideas. It's really hard to think out of the box when everything's on Zoom. And so my first question for all the panelists would be, what's the best virtual event you've held or attended? And I think we can just go in the same order as you introduced yourselves.
Cool. So I'm obviously, maybe not obviously, but I'm not a college student. I graduated around 3 years ago. And I know coming from having events in person, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this in college, it's really even hard sometimes to get a turnout when you're in person. So when Zoom is such a commodity and you're on all day and it's exhausting and you're in Zoom fatigue and you need your blue light glasses, there has to be something emotional driving you to come to these events. Part of the Home from College platform is really to tailor these events to specific lifestyle groups or segments. So if you're the president of a club or a member in a club, really thinking through being super specific and tailored about what kind of events you are bringing as an offering that's not commoditized. So maybe like networking 101 events are just like everybody's doing them, or one-off panel events that are just like very, you know, baseline. Something that we did early in Home from Colleges, we created a diversity, equity, and inclusion event around, this was right when everything was happening with George Floyd and you know, the world was responding. We created an event with the head of diversity and inclusion at Forbes, and we partnered actually with a club at Michigan that was focused on embedding that conversation into the culture of the club when they were recruiting. So we made an intentional approach in targeting a specific group that was caring about this with an angle that was super relevant to that moment. And I know that's harder to do, plan in advance, but we ended up having over 800 students attend and was really productive. And I think just being focused around that and really leaning into your new unique value prop of your club or organization is super important to make it tailored to that audience.
Yeah, so for me, I know recently with everything going on in COVID, people really haven't been able to, you know, meet in person and interact as they normally would. So I know that a lot of different organizations and groups are really switching to virtual programming. And I'd probably have to say the best one I've attended so far in terms of just kind of how smoothly it went and just kind of how excited people were and how interesting the offerings were was when I was able to attend international convention for Circle K International a couple months ago. And we had over, I think around 2,000 people there, just from all across the states and even internationally. And it ran really well. There wasn't any issues. It was all held over Zoom, and they even had things like breakout rooms, even separate sessions for different things, such as workshops or speakers. I think one of the really great things I've been noticing a lot of is now that we have a virtual setting, we can actually it offers more flexibility when it comes to, say, booking speakers. So we actually were able to get more speakers to come to the event. So we actually had the youngest ever mayor of Tempe, Arizona speak to everyone. And I don't think he actually would have been able to come if it wasn't virtual, because it just made it easier on his schedule. He could just be in his home. But also actually, I think the probably most exciting and coolest part of that convention was actually how I was introduced to Glimpse, which is kind of interesting because the organization itself had used it for a networking session with alumni of the organization and college alumni who were working professionals, as well as just older adults and mentors in general. So we were able to kind of do that networking session. I think there's maybe 200 or so people, everyone from college students to you know, entrepreneurs, people who were running businesses, people who worked in all different sectors like education or business. And I was able to, you know, connect with these professionals on a one-on-one session virtually that I don't think I would have been able to do, especially in person. So it was really great kind of having that exposure and flexibility in terms of event planning. And it just went really well, and it was very, very exciting.
So for me, it wasn't an event that our team hosted, but the Math and Computer Science Society on our campus did for Frosh. So one of the big concerns coming into freshman year is like that's when you meet everybody and it's supposed to be fun, and we were worried like how we would create that experience for first years. So what they actually did was a MasterChef cook-off between two of the professors in our department. And it was really cool. Both the profs were in their own houses. They had their own food setups going. They were doing a Slido as they were cooking and answering questions, but it was just a really great way for students to see the professors as humans and not just professors, and create that bond virtually. And also just do something that's a pretty it's a human experience cooking. It's something that we all can kind of just watch casually. It's a no pressure environment. And then they were answering questions as they went along in a very informal setting. So they did a really great job pulling that off. They had a lot of turnout, not just from first years, but also from upper years who were curious to see what their profs would cook up.
Yeah, my favorite virtual event that I've attended has been with our student-run record label, and they hosted a virtual songwriting event where the one of the artists who signed with the record label would kind of pull lyrics from the crowd, and it was a really interactive experience where those who joined the Zoom could help write the lyrics to a song, and she had already a couple of tracks to choose from, and they kind of got to pick the track, and then they kind of as a collective built this song together, which was really, really cool. And then an event I'm looking forward to is our programming board is going head to head with our student government in a Family Feud event, and so it's going to get really personal and really funny, so that students can kind of get to know who's kind of leading them in these bigger organizations and make them feel a little bit more personal.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. Quick message to the audience. If your microphone is on, would you mind turning it off? I think we're getting a little bit of background noise from some people. Thank you. And our next question goes to Julia and Venise. A lot of people were curious about your experience founding an organization. So could you both talk a little bit about that and provide some tips for students who are looking to start their own organizations virtually right now?
Yeah, I can start. So when I was in college, I started an organization called Vision, which I always have had kind of this entrepreneurial bug, but didn't really know exactly how to replicate over and over again, or think about in a college environment. It's kind of hard. There's tons of red tape. You know, you create one process that works really well. Maybe you do a live event, maybe you do a pop-up, whatever it ends up being, but it's really hard if you don't figure out that protocol, how to replicate it. So I created a club in college called Vision, which was essentially, we met twice a semester around a specific concept. So we would have students come in and basically pitch an idea that they would want to bring to fruition that semester, and we would strategize on bringing their vision to reality. And it was obviously, you know, the infrastructural issues of building a club are very similar to building a company, in some capacity, in a smaller scale for sure, but that was a really awesome experience to be able to figure out how to manage, how to delegate time and energy and mobilize people. That was really the foundation for my first company called WAYV, which is an experiential agency working with a lot of brands like Refinery29, Google, Shopify, to bring experiences to different college campuses. And that was just a great kind of groundwork to develop relationships with students and know how to be a human and think about what it means, you know, to ask something of someone when they have other responsibilities. And I think that's the biggest challenge when you're running a club on a college campus, is that everybody has work, everybody's not going to make a meeting. The lack of accountability makes it really challenging to move the program forward. And I'm sure in a virtual way it is as well. So I would just, if you are part of an organization, download Trello, get everybody on Trello and tag them in everything, because especially in this remote world, you need to have people accountable. So that would be my biggest recommendation. It's been a lifesaver for me for my business design clubs.
Yeah, so jumping off of that, I definitely agree. There's a lot of red tape when you're trying to create something at university. So I founded the Women in Science and Computing team, and we basically, our goal is to create a space for female identifying students in STEM to really just get established in their careers, and also just start a conversation about what diversity and inclusion in STEM looks like and how we can create safe spaces for everybody. So a couple things I'll say if you're looking to start an organization. The biggest one is it's definitely hectic at the start. I feel like my role was very much, I was doing everything at once. It was less strategy, more you're just wearing a whole bunch of different hats. You're putting out fires as they come up. There is a lot of red tape that you have to work through, a lot of things that I didn't know about the process that I would just hit a roadblock and have to come up with another way to do it. So definitely it's not an easy process, but it's definitely rewarding. The next thing I would say is to think about the problem you are trying to solve with your organization. So this may change as you try out events in different formats, or speakers or whatever they might be. But I will say one thing that we did in order to kind of narrow in and on our vision was design thinking sessions with our team. We did like, how might we increase first year retention of female identifying students in computer science? And then we would use those kind of broad questions to figure out what exactly we're going to create in order to answer those questions to make sure we're actually filling a need for the student body. And then the last thing is build a really strong team. I think that can really show whether or not your organization succeeds or not. The people that are on it, bring on people that are better than you at something. You're not able to do everything, especially as you start to scale. So make sure you are looking to build a cross-functional team, get people that are really talented in certain areas, and then bring them together to establish your vision.
That is great advice. And for our next question is for Derek and Julia, and it's, how do you ensure good turnout at virtual events?
Yeah, I can start with this one. So, yeah, turnout it can be difficult, especially on this virtual setting. I know people are busy, people have different circumstances, maybe their home environments or wherever they are may be difficult. Accessibility may be down just because it's just harder for them. Maybe they don't have stable internet access, or some people, again, if you're like a college student and you're hosting events for other college students, some people are in different time zones. Some people are even international students. So it's kind of hard to necessarily bring people together in a way that's easy. What seemed to have worked for me for some of my events that I've hosted and put together, a couple of things. One, of course, marketing, just do reminders. I think with this virtual format, sometimes people can forget when things are. And this isn't just for homework and stuff like that. I know sometimes I feel like I forget that there's stuff going on, but even just events in general, sure, you can remind people, but there's just so much stuff going on and so many other things that you want to be constantly reminding people, whether that's a week before, the day of, just making sure like, hey, you know, we're having this. And you don't have to necessarily worry about being annoying. I know sometimes people worry about that. Obviously, you don't want to flood inboxes, but do periodic reminders, like I said, kind of a week before, the day of, the morning of, stuff like that. And also something that seemed to really work for me is kind of being aware of who your audience is. I found that some of my events that were more niche, kind of targeted towards specific students, whether that's new students or first year students, or even certain like demographic students, like students who are looking for maybe like to meet other people, or even transfer students, just kind of having an idea of who your event is catering to and accommodating. I think that's where I've had the most turnout. But also not just that, but you can kind of, again, be creative, because like I said earlier, I really feel like we're beginning to scratch the surface of what we can really do with virtual programming because of everyone having to transition so suddenly. And there's a lot of things you can do that are unique, like you've already heard, like having like cooking classes over Zoom, right? You're offering something that maybe is exciting that hasn't been done before, or you're putting a different twist on something that has been done before, but now you're doing it virtually. And in that way, you're offering value to the people. And it's really just kind of incentive, because, you know, being online, it is hard. People are tired. People may not want to come to things, especially if they don't have the same experience as it being in person. But if you provide enough value and incentive to those that you're kind of targeting, people will come out. And that's really where most of my success has lied so far, just kind of targeting your audience in that way.
Yeah, I echo Derek. Just to get a little more granular with it, we know that it's obviously super challenging to continue to maintain that line of communication with people remotely, because we get fatigue and basically turn people's attention off. And I'm sure you guys all use Facebook groups or whatever group meets to communicate, and it can just be numbing at times. So this is totally not intended to be a plug, but I think this could be valuable. We had a lot of success in creating kind of this 3-step promotional strategy with Home from College, where we would first educate on the value of the conversation before even introducing who the speaker was. So we use, obviously, you know, all our channels, but if we're talking about the value of creating a diverse and equitable club. We just talk about that as a concept before we even make it feel promo-y, and we create some organic, natural content that talks about that subject to prime the audience subconsciously about what's happening in the near future. Then making a small kind of tease at this is something we value, we align around, and this person is the expert. And then the following piece of content says, we've come together to create this panel and you're not going to want to miss it, kind of combination. So educate high level on what the value prop is, identify who the expert is, and say that you have then gotten the expert, because then you're really priming your audience of why it's valuable to them before they even realize they're going to go. And I think just this is the plug part that wasn't intended. So we've kind of created this formula that we feel really good about at Home from College, and we're really positioning ourselves to be like the cool old sibling to college students and helping support through resources and opportunities. And we launched 2 weeks ago this program where we are onboarding 150 student-run organizations onto our platform, where we develop microsites for all of the clubs. And many clubs don't have their own websites or landing pages or even ways to host their communities in a tangible way. You know, Facebook groups can work sometimes or whatever, but it's really hard to maintain that communication. So if you are a president of a club or part of an organization you would like support, these microsites basically are wisconsinwomeninbusiness.com or homefromcollege.com/wisconsinwomeninbusiness. And this is used as a way for the leader or admin of the club to use this as basically an announcement area where we take a lot of the resources and offerings we create through Home from College that filter through this platform. And it's integrated with text-based marketing. So if you're hosting an event, it doesn't need to be Home from College related. It can be your own. We can schedule texts to send to your communities days before, minutes before, to include that promotional kind of calibration to help get people there. So that's something you're interested in. It's 100% free for clubs. And if you are a member, I'm sure, you know, we'll share our contact information at the end, but I know it's hard to maintain that and control it at scale. So we created that as a resource. And if you're interested, definitely let me know.
Awesome. Thank you, Derek and Julia. And thank you for sharing that resource, Julia. Our next question kind of builds off the previous one. Since people already spend so much time every single day looking at screens for Zoom classes and doing homework, even once you get people to come to your event, sometimes it's really difficult to maintain that engagement. So a question for Frank and Derek: how do you recommend people maintain that level of engagement with their audience throughout the virtual event?
I can hop in here. So I think engagement is something that has to really be thought of from the get-go, almost like as soon as you have an event idea or even like the vision or the reason why you want to do something, the engagement piece should really be kind of at the forefront of the planning process and kind of really envision out how you want students to engage and what does like an ideal level of engagement look like. Because I think with virtual events, you really have the opportunity to give students something that they have to engage with a lot, or that hopefully sometimes there's options where they don't have to engage at all. And I think really identifying that breakdown is super important for eventual success of the event. One thing that I've seen when we really do want to see high levels of engagement is the chat function is actually like really undervalued and underused. I think if you are on Zoom, a little like pro tip in my opinion is to bring in people from your leadership of your organization and have them come onto the Zoom and be really active in the chat. And that will encourage other people to be active. And they don't know that they're a part of the organization, or if they do, they're like, okay, this is really funny. But it really just like breaks that barrier and like shows people that the chat is a space to ask questions, to make jokes. It's a really popular thing at Duke. I don't know at other schools, but like C's in the chat is like this huge thing where it's like a compliment, and like if you're like, okay, C's in the chat for Joyce for hosting the panel, and we get like over 200 C's in the chat, which is like really funny to watch. So that's like one good option. And then the other is just like to bring in a component at the beginning. So kind of like asking students to bring something with them to the event or have a certain Zoom background. That way that they feel connected in some way to the people in the Zoom with them. And it kind of feels like they've made an effort at the forefront, and other people have as well. And so they're more inclined to really buy into the engagement of the event.
Yeah, totally agree with Frank. Like, just using the chat is super underrated. I know I've been trying to do that too for my events, and I call it like breaking the fourth wall. So I feel like sometimes there's a very much like, let's say you're presenting something or you're like hosting this thing where there's not a lot of interaction, you can just stop and be like, all right, guys, like I need you guys to get hype. Blow up the chat if you're interested in this, and people will just blow up the chat, and it gets people interactive, right? They get excited, they want to do things, and because they're interacting with you and you're kind of acknowledging them, right? They are more likely to stay engaged for the rest of the actual event. And also, one big thing is something that I've really seen be effective is you really kind of have to try to establish the feeling from the get-go, right? The beginning of the event. Like if you start off being very dry and boring, I feel like that vibe is really going to follow you throughout the entire rest of the event or programming. And sure, you can change it, but it's just kind of like their initial reactions and perspective are going to be kind of established already. So it can be hard to change that. A couple of other really small things, just really trying to make sure you bring in graphics, different things, because I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen from classes and stuff, it can get very boring just listening to one person talk. It's like you're watching a really boring monologue in a movie or something. You don't want to pay attention. You don't want to do anything. You might not even, like you might leave, honestly. Some people have left events and stuff because they're like, this isn't worth my time, right? People are busy. Bringing in different things like graphics where people can look at, using the chat to engage. Polls are great. You really want to get people involved. And that can be a variety of things. And also just switching up kind of the actual programming itself, because even though, for example, you are giving a presentation, that doesn't mean you can't make it interactive. That doesn't mean you can't do polls. Doesn't mean you can't bring in like, hey, I'm going to share with you guys this video. Hey, I need you guys to do this little quick thing for me in the chat. Hey, I need you guys to private message me a couple answers, right? You want to make it interactive so that way it's not boring, because I know for sure also people's span of attention, you will lose their attention if it gets boring, and within like what was it, like just seconds or 20 seconds or so or something along those lines. So you want to kind of keep refreshing that, right? Even using things like buzzwords, like I'm sure if you've been in multiple Zoom things where you kind of zone out a little bit and someone says something really interesting and you pike up your interest. It's like, wow, that sounded interesting. What did they say? And even if you didn't hear it, you kind of go back to the actual session itself. So even if you're doing fun facts, even if you say like really random stuff, you're really grabbing their attention, and you want to keep it there so people don't get bored. And also something I know we're gonna kind of touch upon it later, I think too, is I personally hate icebreakers. But there are a couple of ones that are really fun, and you can be more creative, like asking people things that they actually want to answer instead of really cliche trite things like, oh, like how's the weather, or random stuff like just like how has your day been? Things that people are like, it's good. You can ask things like, what would your middle school self think about you today? Like, do you think you'd be cool, or would they call you lame, right? Just random different interesting prompts that really get people thinking and wanting to speak, especially again when you're targeting these prompts to your audience and making them pull them in. So again, that level of engagement and interaction can be different depending on your event, because obviously sometimes you will need to talk more. Sometimes you need to get a lot of stuff done, so you're really rushing through it. But just making sure people stay involved some way, because really things just get boring and you don't want that. So there's just multiple different ways to do it, but those are just a couple of things you can do.
Yeah, those are great tips. Definitely did not think about how important the chat function can be. Our next question is for all the panelists, so we can go in the same order as the intros. And it's, what's a mistake you learned from while virtually leading your organization or hosting a virtual event?
I think it's a great question. So I think I would say something along the lines of building something from the beginning, or activating something during a specific time, like a pandemic, which obviously you need to motivate people to want to re-engage. You need to hold people accountable. You need to manage personalities, whether you're a big or a small organization. And I can share my experience from a business side of things. And I think it's really important to leave room for the human side, because everything right now is pretty 2D. We're all standing here looking at each other through a screen. We'll probably never meet in person. And it's really easy to not invest in that relationship because you may not ever meet. And you probably won't meet for, the next little bit. So I think it's important to figure out that way to build a human relationship, AKA glimpse, and think about really uncovering that deeper human side that lies within everybody and not be so transactional. So I try to take the 2 minutes or so in the front of every meeting to just say something ridiculous. Like, I was on a call with an investor the other day and I was like, I have to ask you, like, where is that plant from in your background? Because I thought I saw it on Etsy or whatever. And then they go on a tangent for 2.5 minutes. And you're like, this is part of building a relationship. And this is something you would do in person. And this is something that you need to apply to your community, to your friends, to your professors, to everybody, because you're not going to get the best out of people if you make it a transaction. And if you think about asking something of someone and you don't know what kind of day they had, you shouldn't ask them, because then they're probably not going to do it if they had a shitty day and you just didn't even ask. So I think it's important to just take a step back, slow down. It's really easy to book your days and have a lot of shit going on, but really just try and uncover the person who's sitting in front of you in a human way, before you make it action driven. And I think that's something you can apply to an organization, to friendships, to professors, to business. I think it's just an important lesson. And I think companies like Glimpse make it easy for you to take the time to do that. So I would highly recommend doing that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It can get very, like, people aren't interested if that happens, and they lose their engagement. And also kind of about that too, I think something that is really beneficial that kind of ties in is having some sort of backup plan or action plan. I know technology can be fickle. I know sometimes it does not work. I know sometimes there are issues with audio if you're using different platforms, using different websites. Have some sort of plan, because again, I think for a lot of us, we're starting to really navigate this uncharted territory before. We're doing things that maybe we haven't done before. And, as they say, right, the show must go on. And you really kind of have to, if let's say an idea you had for an event that you're doing doesn't work, or people are bored, don't be afraid to switch it up. Be like, okay, guys, actually, quick break. We're going to switch to this really quick. We're going to do this. It gets people re-engaged, but also it makes you feel less awkward, because the thing is, it doesn't really matter, I guess, in my opinion, kind of what you're doing in your event. But one of the biggest things is how people leave the event feeling. Sure, maybe you can have a couple hiccups in your event. Maybe there's times where it's awkward. But if people leave your event feeling really great, like, wow, I think that was interesting, I really liked it, I want to do another one, they will remember that. And they will take that energy with them, not just in, like, I'm going to attend another event, but they're probably also going to tell other people, like, hey, I went to this super cool event. It was really fun. It was great. And if you don't kind of have those backup plans, those extra options, you can run into a situation where everyone kind of loses, where you don't know what's going on. People don't know what's going on. It's very awkward. They think you don't know how to run an event, especially if it's like one of the first events or a large event that you've planned. And if they see that, they're going to be very much less inclined to attend future events and just even engage. So having, again, like, for example, one of my organizations, we hosted a game night, and we actually, even though we advertised 2 games, we had like 6 other games on hand in case maybe people weren't feeling the first 2, or maybe they weren't working, or maybe people just got bored within like 20 minutes or so we could switch. And we did. We actually had to use one of them because people got bored of the first 2 games. And if we didn't have any on hand, it would have looked awkward, but we actually seamlessly transitioned. We were like, hey guys, we're going to switch over to this new game. And people were like, great. And they enjoyed it. So really having that backup plan for whatever it is you're doing to kind of continue so that you can finish your event and make sure people leave feeling satisfied.
So for me, the biggest lesson has been in leading my team, specifically just like as an executive, bringing people together. So when we launched last year, it was very easy to form bonds because we were having meetings in person. We'd bring snacks, we'd have side of desk conversations, and there was a lot of people that just connected with like 1 or 2 other people on the team, and that was how we created our community. Transitioning to a virtual world, I knew it was going to be a little bit difficult, especially because we were onboarding new people. But what I was trying to do was just reapply what we did in person, but virtually. So like I was thinking that our team meetings would be a great space for people to connect, not realizing that there is that barrier. People are hesitant to talk. There's people talking over other people. Like it's hard to establish that connection. So what I've had to do is change the way that we interact as a team. So different things we do, like fitness socials together. Randomly, like in the middle of the day, I'll just post in the thread like, hey, how's everyone feeling? Like thumbs up if you're feeling great, heart react if like there's something going on. And then like you reach out to those people and check in to see how they're doing. Another thing we do at our meetings is just start with a really wacky question of the day. It's completely random. Like if you were a Disney character, who would you be? And that's just a way for us to better get to know people's personalities virtually while still just kind of creating that sense of connection. And it's not forced. It's more just like, this is what we'd be doing if we were in person. Now we just have to come up with a different way to deliver it. And I think that's probably just changing my approach in terms of how to connect with people on the team has really made us as a team a lot stronger. And because of that, we're able to put forward better events overall.
One of the biggest things I've learned from a little, I wouldn't say it's a failure, but we definitely gave away some gift cards at the end of last semester, and our entire finances got a little wonky with COVID. And so they didn't get them until like, I think 6 months or 4 months. I don't even know how long we've even been in this, but it was a long time. So definitely make sure that the things that you kind of take for granted, like certain school-wide procedures and things like that, are not changing or haven't changed, and just double check all the things you may have taken for granted, just because those little things like following up on a promise, that should be really easy. And like, part of why people come to the events, like you should be able to follow up on them, and you don't want not checking in with someone from your team to be a barrier to that. So yeah, that's just a little.
Thank you all. And for our last for the panel, again, this goes to everyone. A lot of people were also wondering, how do you guys build a sense of community amongst your members virtually or just amongst the people who are attending your events?
I can start with that one. So the first thing we do is we're always getting feedback from people and we always incentivize them. So it's like, if you fill this form out to give us feedback, $10 gift card, like you'll be entered in a draw for that. Another thing we do is just easy to do kind of challenges on social media. So we recently did a whisper challenge. So we had execs say a fact about a woman in STEM in general, and then people could kind of respond in the Instagram poll with like what they think we're saying, and they'd be entered to win a prize. We did trivia through Instagram polls. We're doing a day in the life of an exec. So like go to school virtually with one of our execs, and one of our execs will take over the Instagram for the day. And it's just really, we know people are probably scrolling through their phones in the middle of a Zoom class. We understand that. And so we're gonna engage with them on the platforms that they use the most. Another thing that we've done is a student spotlight series. And this way we're just like, these are your peers who are doing really cool things. Every week we're gonna feature a new person. If you're interested in like going on this person's podcast or working on this side project with this person, this is an easy way for you to know what people in your community are doing and then connect with them in a less intimidating way. So those are just a couple of things that we've done in order to keep our community connected beyond just hosting events or running projects.
Yeah, same way. I think you have to be very specific and intentional when you're going about building community. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, but knowing who your audience is. So for example, also like identifying issues that are going on. So something I've been really much capitalizing off of is that my school has been kind of hosting different things for new students, and they're not doing the best, unfortunately. So I've noticed this, and I'm like, hey, what are some of the issues people are running into? What are, like, I'm hearing from students, I'm like, hey, what are things you wish you saw, right? What are things you wish you could do? And for example, one big thing was that people just weren't able to get genuine interaction and conversation with other people they wanted to meet, right? Being in a Zoom meeting is hard. You're listening to someone talk. Even having breakout rooms, it's awkward. Like, people don't want to speak. They don't want to show their face. Like, even today I was in one and I just did not want to talk because I was like not interested. But you're offering spaces for people where they can kind of interact in a way that feels genuine. And not just that, not just offering the space, but you're also offering tools for people to do so, right? So when conversation gets dry, it's like, here's a couple of interesting questions you can use. And again, not the weird, awkward ones that people like kind of hear all the time, but